Welcome to Beyond Pipeline. We talk about how top performers win the inner game of sales. My name is John Haboush, and I'm your host. And today we have a very special guest. Coming out of college, he got a job at one of the best tech companies, Dell EMC, and he rose four different roles in the span of just 2.5 years, and then decided to take his skills and his passion for helping people to land dream jobs and started Elite Tech Sales, where he helps professionals to create careers that they're passionate about. Without further ado, Jay Johnston. Jay, how are you?
I'm good, John. Thank you for having me.
Dude, I'm grateful that you've come on. I've heard amazing things from our friends Chris Bussing and Trent Russell, etc. So I'm seriously really grateful that you made time today. I'd love to start today by just better understanding, going back in time with you and better understanding how you got into tech sales. And we'll obviously cover things like, your elite OS for helping people to get a dream job and things like that. But I also want to start with your beginning. So let's go back to your beginning, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so I had a very typical upbringing. I was born in Kansas City, lived here for about 8 years, and then did my first 2 years of college down at the University of Arizona before transferring to the University of Kansas to finish up. And regardless of, how I spent the 4 years and all of that, I ended up with a Bachelor of General Studies at the end of 4 years.
Nice.
And didn't really know how to monetize it. I wanted to get into medical sales like both my parents did. They worked for pretty big name companies like Johnston and Johnston and Abbott Diagnostics. And yeah, I mean it was getting really competitive in that field, and you almost need like a biology degree to like even get a shot at an interview. But yeah, nonetheless, I still interviewed, got declined from, a few big companies like, Stryker, Edwards Life Sciences, all the big medical companies you can imagine. And at that point, like I think I was speaking to my parents and they're like, why are you even doing medical? Like it's so different ever since like 2002 when HIPAA came out, like everything's regulated. I started talking to a few of my buddies who were a few years older in medical sales, and they're kind of joking. They're like, yeah, I feel like a glorified Uber Eats driver. Like I'm just dropping off food and doctors are signing the thing. So at that point, I was like, okay, maybe I'm focusing my energy in the wrong spot. But nonetheless, after, I feel like it was like 200 failed applications, 50 failed interviews. I was like, let's like try this whole tech sales thing. And at that point, my interviewing became sharp through all the failure and all the feedback. And I think within a week, I ended up getting an interview with Dell EMC. I flew out to Boston, got a rental car, drove I think 45 minutes to Hopkinton, Massachusetts, got thrown into a room with like a dozen people who were also interviewing that day. And I'm like, how many spots are there? And are we selling laptops? Like I had no idea what I was doing, and ended up landing the role, taking the job in the Austin, Texas office. And then really, really just worked hard, advanced four roles in my first 2.5 years. And kind of at the towards the end of that journey, I was looking for a creative outlet to help other people really have the same transformation I was lucky to have. And that is what started Elite Tech Sales.
I love how you kind of like it wasn't a perfect story. You kind of fumbled around, figured it out, somehow got a job at Dell EMC, and then obviously was very successful there, and so on and so forth. I do want to dive into you in with you as I'm thinking about a lot of the people right now, and I've been laid off before. I've obviously started out coming out of college having no idea what I was doing. What was it like for you to go through that process of, hey, I applied 200 times, I got denied. I really don't know what I want to go do. And then all of a sudden getting yourself into Dell EMC, like, can you walk us through how you handled that? And just, yeah, we are able to progress from getting denied a bunch of times to actually getting that first foot in the door at Dell.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was really difficult because I thought my career services was going to help me. I thought they knew the answer, and they just didn't. And so it was almost like my best just wasn't good enough. So how could I make my best even better? And
Yeah.
it was just listening to feedback and then understanding, okay, well, what would be a good resume that I would want to look at? How can I design that for them? How can I give them a good experience? And so I think for me, what was sticking through my head the whole time, especially in a tough job market like today, is I only need one. Like this isn't
Yeah.
an
I like that.
actual sales activity where like I need like this much pipeline and this many deals to close per quarter. I was like, I literally just need one to say yes on me. And that thought itself kept me going throughout the whole process.
I want to follow up on something. I saw you said this in a different interview, which I loved, and I want to come back to it. You said my best wasn't good enough. I needed to get better. I think people have a lot of challenge being that honest with themselves and going, okay, like my best isn't good enough. I need to do what's necessary, right? Which is somewhere above that. What have you always like? I'm gonna ask a double question. Have you always been like that? And then two, how can someone coach themselves to be more honest so that they can grow like that? Because I feel like a lot of people struggle, whether it's in the sales role or when getting a new job, whatever it is, they want to blame external circumstances. And I've seen you, yeah, I've seen this repeatedly with you, and I really admire the overall trait.
Yeah, I will say a lot of it came from athletics.
Okay.
I played competitive soccer growing up, and I think it was around like my freshman or sophomore year of high school. I had a coach. He did all my strength and conditioning with me, and like I would leave the workouts almost like throwing up, like they were really hard workouts. And I remember one day he came up to me, he's like, Jay, you have to stop using the 20s. You have to start using the 25s, the 30s. You have to start pushing yourself. And he told me, he's like, hey, everything past your point of fatigue is room for growth. And that's what really resonated with me. And so from that point on, I actually applied the concept to my life. And then my junior year of high school, I won a state championship. And then my senior year of high school, I won a state championship and I was first team all state. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's some validity to this. Everything past your point of fatigue is room for growth. And then I applied that when I became a personal trainer in college and I would tell my clients that. So for me, it was like I had real data on that concept that it actually worked in my life. And it's just something that I keep applying when I did like my first half Ironman or I did the Austin Marathon a few years ago. I was like, let's see how far I can go. And I think for I think for a lot of people, like when they're put in a situation like, is my best good enough? Do I need to make my best even better? I think a lot of the times, like people can have an avoidant tendency where like they don't want to actually look themselves in the mirror, or like even something I still struggle with daily is invoking like a vision for your life and what you want it to look like and what you want. Like if everything went right, if everything went right, what would you have accomplished by the end of the year? So it's like, I think if people are willing to set a vision or look at themselves honestly with like and what their vision is, like that can actually create the area of opportunity to capitalize on some of those areas that need to improve. And realistically, it's like that's going to make a good seller great. So it's really callousing yourself for a sales role to go in and crush it.
And I want to follow up on that. I think that so I love what you said about being like, hey, what would my life look like if I didn't essentially I'll say if I didn't have any constraints or if it went exactly how I wanted it to. That said, as you said that, even in my brain, I noticed but my brain said, oh, there's always going to be issues, there's always going to be challenges, right? So then how do you move the clutter of the excuses? I'll call them excuses in my world at least. They're generally excuses. How do you help people remove the clutter of excuses so then they can have a better vision for okay, like I might have gotten laid off a month ago, but what would my dream job look like right now? Or I'm not performing well in my sales role. What would what would an ideal outcome look like over the next 6 to 9 months? Right? Like, how do you declutter that so people can actually focus on what the ideal outcome would be?
So I will answer that with an example. And I had an experience very recently where I did a leadership seminar in Austin, Texas, where we both live, and a really, really cool seminar. It was, it's called Ascension Leadership Academy, really cool program. And there's a ton of leaders that come in it, and you work through emotional intelligence and you also set goals. And what was really crazy for me is like people have tried to like help me through this advice my whole life. It's like, hey, like how do you just build a stronger inner game to like get the result you want? And what was really interesting for me, and it was like a big aha moment, was like the people at these seminars were just brilliant. Like they were COOs, we had an MLB pitcher who pitched 17 seasons. We had another guy who sold like 13 companies. And so when there's like 50 of us in this little container for about 3 different months, we had these goals we set. And maybe the goal was, hey, I want to get this much to revenue with my company, or I want to do this, this, and this. And so for the first time in my life, there was no barrier to knowledge or time to knowledge. Like I was literally surrounded with the smartest people, arguably like in their domain, just giving free advice. And I would give advice on like B2B sales, and like we were all just helping each other. And so when I was going through that process, like that was the big aha moment where I was like, oh wow, like it's actually really easy to go from A to B. Like, oh, you need a job. Okay, sweet. Like, let's take the steps to do it. The problem is we just have these little voices in our heads that get in the way of us taking action. And so, when I'm like, hey, I'm looking to get on, let's say, get on a ton of podcasts. And one of the guys like, oh, well, I do podcasts for a living, all this, I can connect you with like 10 people. Here's all you have to do. Like no longer could that voice in my head function anymore because it was just inaccurate. And all of it was just self-limiting belief. And I think that's what a lot of people fall into is these self-limiting beliefs. And typically it's narratives that we pick up from our family, our friends. And that's why it's so important with whose thoughts we couple to and who we speak with on a daily basis. And so I think for me, like to really answer your question, like a lot of times when we constitute a vision and we have a big vision, it feels like really uncomfortable, but it's not impossible. It's like literally just the noise inside our head telling us like you can't, but it's like if you just tell yourself, hey, like that thought doesn't support my vision, let me choose an empowering one. Like that's just a conscious choice to move in the direction you actually want to move in.
And I'd follow up with how do people keep doing that when maybe they do that a couple times, but then they go back like you because the physiology changes, like you experience doubt or whatever that is. Like, how do you help people through that when they're like, "Hey, I get that there's a tool here, but then I still don't feel that way." Like, how do you help them through that?
Yeah, so journaling every day, whether it's in the morning, constituting my goals for the day, and then in the evening when it's, hey, what's the feedback for myself? Did I perform the 1 to 3 tasks I wanted to get done? And I look at that as like the fine combing every day to like
Mhm.
get back into that centered state of like, okay, well, I'm looking at my Asana board. I have like 50 tasks I could get done, but like, what are the three that are actually going to move the needle? And what's really cool about that is like it could be very high level, like working with my assistant to be like, hey, here's what our perfect week looks like, and let's like build it out. Um, and it's cool because if I end up not actioning it during the day, I'm like, oh, like what limiting belief got into my head? So it's just like a fine combing experience to hit the journal every day and be like, oh, I need to do this. I actually got that done. What limiting beliefs were stopping me? Oh, is this one, and this one? Great. Let's not let that happen anymore. Let's try again tomorrow.
I love how like retrospective you are. Just like going, okay, like what limited me? What can I do to have an ideal day? Uh, those are some really good highlights from that. So I want to go back now to your overall story. You're at Dell EMC, perform really, really highly. What what enabled you to yeah, walk us through more about your experience at Dell EMC. I know you rose like four different roles in about 2.5 years. Love to walk through that path and go from there.
Yeah, so I mean Dell EMC has an amazing program, Next Gen Sales Academy, and
Mhm.
they have so many brilliant people who run the program, like so many resources to succeed. And yeah, I started off as an SDR. Yeah, just I mean, technically I think I went to the office for 4 months before COVID hit every day. So that was like a beautiful experience. I think I was taking cold calls like right next to our development team. So like they could hear me like cold call. And honestly, like that in itself was like one of the hacks to getting promoted is like actually just building a good internal brand with people, like getting in the office, shaking hands, doing all that. So was an SDR for maybe like 9 or 10 months. It was a little wonky during COVID. There was like an accelerated promotion path, it kind of like got canceled, and then it was like still got out to be an AE on time. And then when I was an account executive, I was working in our like Minnesota territory, which was really fun. We had like the Vikings and a few other like pretty massive companies, and I think um, I think for me, I just learned so much in a quick time horizon about how to build relationships with people. And I think a lot
Mhm.
of that was energy beats form. Like, yes, there's like form in terms of like frameworks for MAMP, BAMP, MEDPIC, like whatever you want. And like you need to qualify that because you have deal reviews and you have to like present that to your manager. But I think for me, like it was really just getting a PhD in like how Dell EMC worked. Like, okay, well, who's our channel ecosystem? Who can run deals for us? Where can we cross sell in the portfolio with people who already are buying laptops and servers that we can leverage for a warm inroad to set up an in-person meeting, or something like that for my field rep at the time. And essentially just went guns blazing into the role as an account executive and ended up in a short time hitting about 300% of my quota, which was awesome.
Nice.
And I think when I say like I got lucky, like from at least a Dell perspective, or at least my experience, like management roles are like very few and far between to come by. And yeah, I think you needed to at least be an account executive. Like the minimum was like 3/4 to even apply for a role. And I was like just at that threshold when one of the districts opened up to become a manager of account executives. And I was 24. I liked being an AE, but I always liked being, or the thought of being a leader. Like I didn't know what it actually entailed. And I just remember going for, or putting my name in the hat and like talking to our director. And I'm like, like, do we have courses on how to be a manager? Like, how do we actually do this? And she's like, no, like if you end up getting the role, like you just got to figure it out. But obviously you don't want to enter the interview with that frame of like, I have no idea how to be a manager. And so what I ended up doing in order to accelerate that time to learn what a manager was like is I actually set time with probably like 14 or 16 leaders within the organization. So I was in when I was an inside account executive, I worked in mid-market. And so I met with like our acquisition leaders. I met with, I think, other mid-market leaders. I met with enterprise leaders. And then we have like a tier one, which is in between like mid-market and enterprise. And I just asked them like very dialed questions. I was like, hey, like, what is the biggest mistake people typically make their first quarter of managing? And like, what advice would you give them to overcome that? And so I just had like a laundry list of like dialed questions, kind of like you do for your interviews. And I remember going into my interview and like I presented well, I had everything look good. And then obviously there's the hesitations that pop up where it's like, well, hey, you don't have experience. We have people who do like all this stuff. And I remember just pulling up the PowerPoint of like all the dialed questions I had and the answers. And like at that point, they knew I'd like studied, overcome everything, and then became ultimately got the job to be a manager at 24. And I did that for about a year. And there was it was still kind of that wonky time of COVID. But I think from what I remember, like we really wanted people back in the office. I am more like a pro remote type of person. And so the way the manager contracts worked at Dell is I believe like they're a year long and like you can extend. And I think towards the end of that, like it was like, hey, you can extend, but we want you back in office like every day. And ultimately, like I just didn't want to be back in office at that time of my life. And so it was really cool. But like one of our literally top field territories became open around the same time, the Colorado and Utah area. The field rep at the time, he left. I think he ended up going to a competitor like Nutanix. Like it was nothing about the territory. Like the territory was killer. And so I was like, you know what? Like this is an amazing opportunity. We had a ton of startups with like recent funding in it. We had like the Denver Broncos and Colorado Rockies. And I mean, literally as a field rep, I think my first event is we got our marketing team to spend like $40,000 on a Broncos home opener suite where I could just invite C-levels and like meet them. So that was like the high level of the trajectory. And I think what I really liked about the whole transformation is every one of those four roles taught me like completely different skills. Like SDR is way different than being an AE. It's like one you're setting meetings, the other you're closing. Managing's a whole different ball game. Like I had to like learn how to communicate with people based on like disc personality assessments and things like that. And then when I finally became a field rep, I'm like, okay, I understand at a high level like all these skills, but it's like, how do I keep things just very high level with C-levels consistently now? And that itself was like a really unique opportunity. So that's the high level, and happy to dive into any in detail if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. There were some key highlights I want to definitely talk about. Just even like your effectiveness in building a brand internally. I like a lot too is to enter the energy over form. I think let's dive first into the let's do the networking for or the brand internal brand. I think you're someone that can just like I can feel like you do a really good job at like building internal brand, building relationships. Like so thinking higher bigger picture, especially in Dell EMC. It's a big org. I think it's like what, it's like a $70 billion company, something like that. Um, would love to understand what made you create the relationship or just how gave you the ability to grow like that within the org itself. I understand, it sounded like there was some opportunity that just opened up there, but also I know you probably did a lot of things right. What were some things you did right to grow within the company itself?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think a lot of it's just networking all the time and like actually being yourself. So what a lot of people don't know, and I should try to find photos of this, but like when I was in the office for 4 months as an SDR, like I was 100% myself. Like I always felt weird getting a corporate job because I thought it was like this indoctrination where you had to fit a certain mold and like you couldn't vary from the pack. But I actually like was completely myself. I walked in the first day with a man bun. I was wearing barefoot shoes. I literally would wear like a posture brace while I was doing cold calls, and like I was adamant on our HR to get me a standing desk like ASAP. And I'd, be golfing. Like I was just having a really, really fun time. And so that itself is like the art of differentiation is like when managers like go into their huddles and they talk about everyone like, yes, like it's really good to hit your metrics like I was hitting, but like then it comes down to like who's just like a fun person to be around. And like that's like what I always try to do is like be that person who's getting their stuff done, but like, yeah, like you want to play ping pong over lunch? Like, let's do it. And like, I'm gonna try to beat you. Like I thought that was just like fun and like a very community oriented way. And I think those are things that really make a difference when you want to get promoted or, you know, and just like an example that one of our members did recently, he landed a job at one of the top companies on RepView. It's called Samsara. I'm sure you've heard of
Mhm.
it. And he like was a brand new SDR, and he got done with this meeting with the VP of sales and the whole entire global org, or yeah, I believe global org, and they had a major initiative for like automating more internal workflows within the company. And so this new guy who we worked with, he reached out to him after the meeting on a single email thread and was like, hey, here are my 3 suggestions on how to improve things. And now the VP or whomever is in charge of that was like, okay, I want you to help me lead this as an SDR. And like things like that give such good opportunity to build a relationship. And so those are just like a few small things I did. I think like other tips and tricks, like tactical advice is like literally like if you can just care about what your manager cares about, like you will be set. Like every company is going to have a new go to market, new product change, new KPIs, like you name it, you're going to have it. It is sales. Just get used to it. Otherwise, it's going to be a long career. And like other things that I did really quickly is like, oh, we had a new product come out. It was called like Power Store, and everyone's like, screw that product. Like, and the product's like amazing, but like people just don't like change. And so instead of like complaining, it's just like embracing the adversity and setting the most meetings for the new product so you can stand out in a very differentiated way compared to everyone else who's complaining. And by the way, that idea to release a new product, Power Store, they've been thinking about that for probably 3 to 5 years. So like this isn't something that just woke up and
Woke
decided
up
like,
one day, yeah.
yeah, this is a flagship product in our portfolio. So just like get over whatever is in your head and just set meetings and like create good differentiation. So you create that good internal brand for yourself.
The main pull through our main thing I learned from that was like be yourself, and thus you'll be differentiated, and thus you'll stand out in likely a good way. Is that the key lesson there, or is there something else appeals should take? Because I feel like you're very good at this. I can just kind of tell you obviously can just do it. Yeah, what's the key lesson there?
Yeah, so I think you summed it up well. And maybe like a way to look at it is, and this is actually happening with online marketing right now, is the more you can talk about like yourself and the things that make you special, John, or me, Jay, special, it's like the less you can become a commodity. And like a commodity in the market always becomes a price war to the bottom. So if we're both like selling socks and then like another person enters the market, like it's just going to be a price war to the bottom because we've created a commodity. Well, like if you're actually showing up every day and you're like being yourself and you're differentiated and there's all these unique things about you, like all of a sudden, like you're not just another employee, like you're John, and like you've created all this differentiation that it's not like this metric war to the bottom of like who's going to get promoted. It's like, okay, metrics are good. Now, like, who do we want to work with? And so it's all about decommoditizing yourself.
The decommoditizing is something that I see right now as well. Just even on LinkedIn, if you see always people posting and stuff, and it's like, how do you make yourself different? I think that's a really valuable skill that not a lot of people have that I've even working to develop myself. Is how do you? It's not that you have to try to be different; you just have to be you, and then and then find a way to package that in a way that's appealing to other people, and yeah, understand your audience. That's such a good yeah, that is such a good learning. So thank you for that. Let's transition to, you said energy over form, and I want to dive into this, probably more of a sales thing than anything else, but I think it's also just an approach overall to probably just to overall just show, I'll say just to life is I want to better understand what you mean by energy over form, and then how that translated for you while you're at Dell EMC.
Yeah, there's a lot we can unpack with it. So I'll keep it as concise as possible. But um, you know, us right now, John, like us having a conversation, like the human connection comes within the energy that you're bringing and I'm bringing. And like you can see, I'm excited to be here. I know you're excited to be here. And like that's actually
Stoked.
like what gets people going. It's not like the, hey, John, we've been a company for 30 years now. We work with XYZ. Like, yes, like you can say all that stuff to open calls and do all that, but it's like I had a mentor tell me this year and it's just been stuck in my head. It's like I was like, "What are your goals like this year?" And he said something to the effect of like, "I want more human experiences." And I was like,
Oh.
"Oh." I was like, "That's interesting." And
Yeah.
that's kind of when I realized it's like when you really think of like what sales is, it's all about energy. It's all about just connecting with another human. And that's why what we're doing here is effective. But like if we were in person, like to do an on-site meeting with the customer right now or something, like it'd even be 10 times more effective
Yeah.
because they feel your energy, feel your enthusiasm. And so I think when people are like really lost in the sauce or they have like a big proposal coming up or all this stuff, like don't forget like the one thing that actually moves the needle in sales, and that's just having good energy and like really trying to connect with the person. And so I always tell people energy over form. Like, yes, like you might be intimidated, scared, unprepared, have notes up, but like you got to have good energy. And that's what we teach a lot with the interviewing. I think even like one of the things we tell people when they interview is like having a high level of empathy. So for us right now, John, it would be like, hey, John, I know you're working a full-time job. You have an amazing podcast. You have so many demands on you, let alone 4th of July weekend, let alone all your friends, possibly significant other, just like pulling for your attention. I'm so happy we had a chance to be here today. I'm going to make this the best hour of your day. And so just by opening up with that frame with empathy and letting you know I came prepared, respectful of your time to give you the best energy, that sets a really good frame to go in and really make someone's day compared to everyone else who's going to go in and just be like, I don't want to be here. I'm busy. It's a Friday. It's like, no, like I'm going to make this the highlight of John's day today. Like that is what I'm about.
Yeah. How do you cultivate that? And the reason I ask is I think that's the hardest, one of the hardest things that someone can learn is how do you cultivate good energy on a consistent basis. I know if I had to work on it, I truly believe it's an absolute skill. Obviously, it's something you do very well. Is like, what do you do to cultivate that type of awareness and energy every day where you're passing off value through your attention and just presence to people and having that empathetic perspective?
Really good question. I've talked to a few of our mutual friends about this, like Trent Russell and Chris Bussing, and I've actually been coaching some people on it too, where they have the exact thing to say, but they need to cultivate the energy. And I think this is where the narrative in my head has always been like, oh, if I actually get into this topic with salespeople, they're gonna think it's like a little woo-woo. But the the thing is like like when I was in college, my dad pretty much told me like junior year of college, like, hey, you need to start paying for some of this, like become a bartender, like you're gonna make more than the average college student. I was like, I do not want to stay up late. I don't even like drinking. I'm going to become a personal trainer. And so that's when I actually became educated in, oh, like what you feed your body, what you feed your mind, like what you're always feeding yourself is going to show up in the world. And so when it comes to cultivating that energy from a tactical standpoint, there are some things I've adopted. One is a healthy diet. I'm a big fan of trying things out and like seeing what works. Like my big thing I'm doing right now is no caffeine. I used to be on coffee for a long time and
Oh,
I'm like,
bro,
oh,
good for you. Oof.
yeah, but it's like I actually have better, more sustained energy off caffeine. Or another hack that I can do is when I lived on the east side of Austin, I lived like right by this amazing gym with the cold plunge and sauna. If I didn't have time to work out that day, I would just go cold plunge and sauna and change my physiology. So it
Yeah.
was a less of a barrier to do than like going on a 5 mile run to change my physiology. There are like for at least men, there's like some spiritual books that like have dove into it. I can't say I'm like a firm believer, but like if anyone wants to look up like Man Talk Chia and like what he's written about, there's some pretty interesting stuff that I do think holds a lot of validity. And then I think last but not least, it's really it's really about like what type of stuff we're consuming on a day-to-day basis. And I think of that as like our content diet. I don't really use social media that much. Like when you see me post on like LinkedIn and Twitter and stuff, like a lot of it's planned ahead of time and I'm not really on the platform. So I try to really just tune my frequency into more knowledge or more content that's a little more evergreen, um like the news and the media and everything like that. Like a lot of it's like I don't want to say like fabricated, but they're like a really good marketer who's blown up, who's right outside the Austin area is Ryan Holiday. He has a book called
Hmm.
Trust Me, I'm Lying, all about like how the media would manipulate like stories and everything and how it's all to drive traffic for advertising. And I think for me, like that's really important because the nutritional density of the content you consume can like really change the frequency you operate at. So like if I wanted to actually get an impact out of something that I'm consuming, I would choose something with a really hard barrier to entry to make, which would be like a book. Like a book is not made by accident. Like a book is made throughout a long process, vetted out. It's like someone's best ideas, like literally compiled into this, 4 to 8 hour audiobook or like this 200 to 300 page book. So all those things put together can like really put you in a good energetic state. And I think like last but not least, when people are really stuck in their own stuff, I always tell them the reason you're stuck in your own stuff is because you're too worried about yourself. And people are like, well, yeah, I
Dude.
should be. And so it's like how like this has been my challenge, but how can you focus out like when you're stuck? So like a lot of times when I'm stuck and I'm on calls or I'm trying to figure out what to do, it's like, okay, let me stop focusing on myself and like let me check in with John. Like, John, what's your vision right now? Like, what obstacles are in your way? Like, how can I help? And like just being like a good member and like serving other people, like I'm helping you because you might not know what your vision is on the spot right now, but by me asking you gives you this beautiful opportunity to figure out what it is. And then for me, it's beautiful because I get the feedback of just listening to you, what you're experiencing. Can I take anything out of what's going on in John's world and apply it to my life? Because he's very knowledgeable. So there's a whole Rolodex of things, but I think the main thing is just take action, try something. Like even Tim Ferriss, when he started his podcast, one of the biggest podcasts right now, his whole thing was he didn't go around telling everyone, I'm going to start the biggest podcast in the world. He said, I am committed to 6 episodes and I am going to see if I like it. And I think if people could enter the frame of that with a diet, with journaling, with cold plunging, with reading one book, like I think that's going to be the best starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. A willingness just to try things and then see if they work for you and then move on. You talk about you talk about, being able to get outside of yourself and being able to, people are stuck, being able to focus outward and provide value to the people outward, things like that. I'm curious, what has been maybe a chime in your life where you have felt really stuck or you have felt really, really challenged or yeah, just yeah, been in a moment where you've really felt some doubt? Because right now, obviously on this call, you come off as very confident. I can tell you are, but I'm sure it's a process to get to that point. What has been a time where you just felt really doubtful or really stuck, and how did you get out of it?
So I would even say recently, like a month or so ago, I uh I was just traveling a lot and just like didn't I don't know, like it kind of got sold like the nomadic dream of like traveling and having fun, but I'm like I actually like having stability. And so I traveled like everywhere. I was in Mexico City, I was in Colombia, I was in Hawaii. I was just kind of like
Nice.
maybe from the outside, people would be like, "Oh, that's amazing. You're
Yeah,
living the
that was my
life."
reaction, but
Yeah.
I also know what you're talking about. Yeah, sorry, go continue.
No, no, and I think it's awesome to have that experience, but like truthfully, like I just want stability. And like I had like such this image thing where I wanted people to like feel like I was successful and all this, and I had to do X, Y, and Z. And so what was kind of funny is like I've been working on like a few different projects, like we have elite tech sales, but I'm always working on stuff in the background, a lot of cool stuff coming out soon, which I'm excited to share. But one of the trips I was on was in Hawaii, and one of my friends from Austin invited me to a party while I was on the island. And I mean, I hang out with older people. He's like 45, 47. And I was on the island with my buddy who's a chiropractor on the island. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go meet with my buddy from Austin. He invited me to a get together. And my buddy, like the day of the get together, is like, hey, it's actually just like wear something black and white and it's actually a sweet 16. And I'm like, dude, why are we going to a sweet 16? Like I'm 27, he's like in his 40s. And apparently he's friends with like all the parents of the daughters. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Like I'll go. And so I'm at this party and it's like 16-year-olds and then 47-year-olds. And I'm like the 127-year-old. I'm like, who do I talk to? What do I do? It's like this random house in Oahu. We're just like on the beach, and finally there's like this old man there, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go talk to this guy. Like I have no one else to talk to. Like let's just focus out and like see what happens in this conversation. And believe it or not, like this guy sold like 50,000 copies of a book of like how to sell yourself into a dream company. He was an amazing marketer, started the Milk Mustache campaign. And it was so funny because like, well, I was like lost in my stuff, like by invoking him and like his vision, the next book he's going to publish and all the success he's had that actually overlaps with the stuff that I do. Like we just built this amazing relationship, like where I could have just been focused on myself and like everything I was lacking in that moment, but I just made a conscious decision to be like, what would it be like to just focus my energy outwards? And I think that's just such a small example of like what I do on a daily basis when I am stuck, because now I have a great relationship with him and I can help him promote his new book and he loves what we're doing at Elite Tech Sales. And it's all these win-win situations that are happening now that I'm focusing out instead of focusing
No.
in.
The question I want to pull there for everyone is what you just said. It was what can I do to focus outward? What was the question you just asked? It was really good.
Yeah, what can I do to focus
Focus.
outwards?
Yes, I think that's a very good question people can ask throughout their day to get outside. Because I agree with you. When you feel the most doubtful, most stuck, it's because you're focused in on yourself, right? And even when I have a day or a moment, it's not never really a day. It's always like a moment or a couple hours where you're not feeling quite like on. It's like, how can I provide value to someone? How can I give to someone's day? I guess that's a very, very powerful insight. So thank you for that. Let's um let's talk a little bit about now you left Dell EMC, you started Elite Tech Sales. Would love to understand, would love to walk through your story of like what caused you to do that, how you got to where you are today, and then dive a little bit into the Elite OS system, or into the Elite OS and kind of go from there.
Yeah, so when I was at Dell, I think yeah, right as I was starting in field sales, I've always had the knack for entrepreneurship, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what's something I can make? And I was hanging out with a lot of people in Austin. I'm like, okay, do I do a product? Do I do a service? Like, okay, do a service. Like it's just easier to get started. So it's like lower the barrier to entry, create a service. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll start a service with like how to actually no, I think the first service I started was like sales consulting.
Okay.
And what was funny about it, I was like, oh, this isn't scalable. Like it is, but like to get started, like every company has like very different unique use cases. Like it's not something like rinse and repeat, like getting someone a job. It's the same deliverable, same problem. And so I pivoted into like, okay, let's like break into tech sales and then let's land at top 1% companies. And I think the reason I decided to go all in on that is like interviewing's just been my bread and butter ever since I started in corporate. It's like literally what allowed me to position myself so well in different interviews. But really like the what I was seeing in the market is there was no one doing what I was doing with my experience. Like I saw a few people in the market who might have been like a sales development rep, they might have become an account executive. It wasn't with like a big brand name distinguishable company like I would want if I was like in college, like going for a service. And so I was like, this is like really unique. And then I also saw a few companies where like the founders didn't even work in tech sales. Like they just got a ton of VC money, spun it up, and like are just trying to like jam people in. And so I was like, I think we have like a very unique value proposition. Like I've been a player, now I'm a coach. And yeah, really for us, like we've grown a lot. I've been all in since about last August, so almost coming up on my first full year outside of Dell. And what I'm most proud about is we pretty much have a member in every top rep view company, like when you look at the rankings, and that's just been like insane to get those results. I've also realized like there's a few things that I want to lead with, and one of them I mentioned before is like creating win-win situations with people. And so, yes, like while we do help like a ton of paid members get jobs and just really crush it in their career, I also do have a free community that I have so many resources on there, whether it's you don't have experience and want to get sales training, we got you. You need actual interview prep, we got you with resume templates, everything. And the content's really good. Like I shot it all in 4K, multiple camera angles at like a very bougie apartment complex in Austin, Texas, I used to live in. And for me, that's been like the coolest thing is like last week I got a message from a guy who's in our free community, like literally paid me $0. And he's like, hey Jay, I just want to thank you for everything you've done. I just landed a job at Intel. This community's been so impactful. And like for me, that's awesome because when when I look at the market and like who is possibly the least financially advantaged, it's someone who's unemployed looking for a job. Granted, some people have, saved up money or like can pay for our services, which is awesome. But for me, it's like if you literally cannot afford to get coaching and everything, like you should not be punished. Like our content should not just be gated because you can't afford it. Like let's create win-win situations. And that's what's been really impactful. And I think for me, just building the brand, building the community, I think our newsletter is just getting to about a little over 1,200 people right now. Communities maybe at like 130 members and growing. It's just a really exciting time. And I I think for me, like every time I get a chat that someone got a result, like it makes me so happy. Like for some of these people, they're actually transforming their wealth trajectory with their whole life. And like I
Yeah.
don't even know if you can put a price on that.
I want to follow up and ask. So let's say because I've actually been in the situation. Let's say someone's got. So I want to get what you would do right now. Let's say you just got laid off. Let's say you got I don't know 40K in student loans. You got maybe 3 months of savings in the bank, right? And you don't really know what you want to do. Maybe you've got a year or 8 months of experience as an SDR. Um, what are you doing right now? Like what are from soup to nuts? Like what are you doing to get to land like a great job at a great place? Like what are some things that you're doing to go do that?
So honestly, I would join our community. And like the reason I'm saying that is like we have all the resources. I host a weekly office hours like for the free members still,
That's
where if they
awesome.
have any questions, I can just walk them through it. And it's like my way to give back. Like I like to be of service to people. And so there's literally no community like that where like you can go in and get free value, free mentorship from like someone who's actually done it. And so if I was in that position, I'd be like, wow, like this is an amazing resource. Let me jump in it. Let me watch a ton of the content. So when I actually do talk to Jay in his free time he's giving, I can ask very intelligent questions. I always tell people that is like, if like even in our coaching program, we have like content, and my thing is like, watch the content so you can download the knowledge, then you can ask intelligent questions based
Yeah.
on the knowledge. So I would totally do that because while it explains everything to get the job, it kind of goes back to the earlier thing of like, what if it was easy and it's just the noise in our head getting in the way? It's like what, and so I think that's like a lot of the inner game people deal with is they just need a proven formula to make that happen. And like for me, it's like, sweet, join the community, um, go go apply yourself, introduce yourself, get referrals, or if like you really want to go after it, like pay for coaching and like let's pay off those student loans, like let's get you in a good position. But I would say the biggest thing that I deal with, and I would say like maybe the smart, I don't want to say the smart people, but people maybe who are oriented the same way that like I would look at a sales career tend to jive to this concept and other people don't. But like I think a lot of young people where they mess up in their sales careers, they don't understand what a cost is. And so like when I talk about a cost, like a cost, there's a cost to joining a new company that's actually a really bad company that doesn't have a promotion path, that doesn't have a good pay, or doesn't even have like good brand recognition to jump to a new company later. And so I always tell people it's like you can land a job. Like that should not be an issue, especially like in our free community. Like you should absolutely be able to land a job. But like if you really want to play in decades over years, like you should think about mitigating your cost and like looking at success on a longer time horizon. And that's what a lot of top performers do. And so it's really breaking that belief early in someone's career. And so when we have our members who, pay for our services and they're at, HubSpot, Oracle, Samsara, all these places, amazing resume, they're getting promoted, they're overachieving quota, like they're the ones who understand the concept at a young age that there is a cost to choosing a wrong choice. And that's like what's really cool about even our free sessions in our community. It's like educating that person who's, you know, 40K in college debt of like what an actual cost is because they think that's the end of the world. And I'm like, no, 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 no. The end of the world is getting back into a job that doesn't give you a promotion path. There's no product market fit. There's no AEs closing top line revenue. So there's never going to be any justification to promote you. Or even worse, like when there is justification, they're just going to hire externally and not pull anyone up. So I would totally recommend joining the community and like what if you watch all of our videos and you're just like, I got no value out of it, like shoot me a chat and like I'll find some way to make it up to you. But I have never heard anyone say that.
So with that being said, right, because I like everything you said. One of the things I want to point out is that you talk a lot about identifying a good company, identifying a good market, right? Or I define market as the industry with which the company sits in, so that it makes it you get leverage from joining a good market. Example being, it'd be a very bad idea right now to join a industry that's in decline or has sell something that is in decline. Whereas if you're selling, I don't know, like a AI go to market tool that helps helps reduce customer acquisition costs. Probably a good tool to be selling right now. So how do you go about? What are some of the criteria you help people look for when identifying a good company and a good opportunity? And where do people usually go wrong?
Yeah, really good question. So with I'll talk about this segment specifically because I'd say like it makes up most of the people we work with is the entry level role. And then we work with account executives as well and so on. But I'd say those people need help the most. And my biggest non-negotiable that I always tell people is promotion path. And I've worked with so many people who they they essentially just want to hit a slam dunk off the bat. They want everything to go right. They want fully remote, amazing pay, product market fit. And like there are those around. Like I helped a guy get a job at Shopify and like they check all those boxes. He makes killer money, overachieves quota. But when I really like ask them what their vision is over a 2 to 3 year time horizon, a lot of it really does come down to, okay, like what is the promotion path going to be? And like, can we actually prove it? And so when you get into an interview, yes, like ask the question, but like don't believe what the hiring manager says. Like go look at the reps on LinkedIn, be like, okay, great. Can you show me someone who's done this? What obstacles do you foresee from this happening in 15 months or 18 months? Because fundamentally the SDR and AE role are like completely different skills. Like one, I thought it was awesome as an SDR. I'm like, oh, I'm just cold calling, sweet talk, and setting appointments. Like I don't have to care about closing the revenue. And then I remember the first day after getting promoted, I'm like, holy crap, I have to take that crappy meeting that I set because I'm the AE now and actually turn it into closed revenue. So that's like a really big one that I look for in terms of like certain verticals. I I do like agree from a macro perspective, like maybe let's not get into like a dying industry if that's like printing paper or something, like maybe like AI tech tier point would be better. But I think it's still looking for companies with that good product market fit
Yeah.
that have a proven track record of success. Ideally like top one or two in their niche. Because I think like especially some of the more tenured people who transition to our program, like we've worked with people, I think one like a few actually had like over a decade of experience in consulting with like EY, Deloitte, like Red Bull, stuff like that. Like their whole thing is they want to de-risk choosing something bad. And I'm like, okay, well, go to a company where you know you're going to get the promotion, they have a good product market fit, they have the resources to help you because once you get that promotion to an account executive, like you have a lot of flexibility in your career to move to that riskier startup or do all that. But it's like an article I wrote if you check out our blog. It's a really funny, people like it. It's called The Right Company for You. And it goes, it should always be followed by it depends. And then it kind of goes over like all of our core criteria of like what you should consider when you really go to make that choice.
I encourage people to check out that article, as I think that's one of the most undervalued skill sets, the ability to identify a quality market and a quality company. Because that's going to dictate like most, like you can put a decent rap or even a bad rap in like a good company with a good product market fit and that has the market itself has momentum, and they're going to do well. And you can put a good rap into a bad market or a bad product market fit and they're not going to do well, they're going to do decent at best. And so it's like that is like such a great skill to have. I love that you teach it because that's just like, I mean, I didn't learn that. I mean, I didn't know that coming in. I had to learn it. Right. And it's such an important skill that I think a lot of people are not taught. I absolutely love that you walk people through that. Um, with that being said, we're almost at time here. I always have a final question, but where can people learn more about you before I ask the final question?
LinkedIn or our website, elitetechsales.com. Yeah, LinkedIn, I try to post every day. And then Elite Tech Sales. We have our coaching program. We also just have that free community that's growing. I literally think it's going to be like the spot for like people to just land the most amazing jobs going forward. Like it is so legit and like people love it. So one of those two places are a great spot.
Awesome. Check out the LinkedIn. You do have some awesome posts and content. I appreciate. I've not seen your Twitter, but I have checked out your other content. Highly suggest. That being said, if there is an SDR right now or AE that either is not fulfilled in their work or maybe they got laid off looking for a new job and they didn't have time to listen to this full episode, but they can only listen to what you're going to say next, what's the one piece of advice that you'd have for them?
Get started. And when I say get started on finding the thing that's going to make you fulfilled. And if you can't find it, it could itself be a limiting belief that you're not worthy, you're not good enough, you're not talented enough, you don't have enough experience to move to that job you actually want. But the reality is good sellers sell themselves into good opportunities, and that could be the limiting belief stopping you from actually working the role you want to work.
Here you go. Find what fulfills you, find your limiting beliefs, get started. Thank you. Make sure to subscribe and to share this with a friend if you found value. And if you didn't, hit me up in the DMs. Thank you all, and I'll talk to you soon.